I am the conclusive truth. Please hear the purport. Among the created manifestations, the first is the creation of the total material elements. As explained before, the cosmic manifestation is created and conducted by Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and Shirodakashaya Vishnu. And then again, it is annihilated by Lord Shiva. Brahma is a secondary creator. All these agents of creation, maintenance, and annihilation are incarnations of the material qualities of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, He is the beginning, the middle, and the end of all creation. For advanced education, there are various kinds of books of knowledge, such as the four Vedas, their 6 supplements, the Vedanta Sutra, books of logic, books of religiosity, and the Puranas. So altogether there are 14 divisions of books of education. Of these, the book which presents Adhyatma Vidya, spiritual knowledge, in particular the Vedanta Sutra, represents Krishna. Among logicians, there are different kinds of argument. Supporting one's argument with evidence that also supports the opposing side is called Jalpa. Merely trying to defeat one's opponent is called Vitanda. But the actual conclusion is called Vada. This conclusive truth is a representation of Krishna. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Mano Vishram Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swamadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sarvajatam Samadana Raghunatam Vitantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Salitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Janapate Gopesha Gopikananta Radha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Vansha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srimad Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Normally this happens to me when I'm in India. I'm very used to it there. Suddenly everything goes off. But in Singapore it's rare. Yes, Jagannath is also taking a break. But don't worry about this. We'll put this aside. I think it will come back. So we want to welcome all devotees today. You can hear me at the back, right? Yes. Not a problem. Yes, good. Good. So today's verse is a very important verse. But how many of you have come for the first time today? I want to see hands that are being raised. Okay. We want to welcome all of you and thank you for coming. Some of you I know already because I've met you at Kirtan programs. And I'm very happy to see you here today. Now, the important thing that I want to give you a flavor of 10th chapter is you have to appreciate why 10th chapter is very important. In 10th chapter, every different field of activity, Krishna picks something superlative. And from that superlative, he says that he is the representation. I give you an example just before this. Before this, in text 31, Krishna said, of all the purifiers, I am the wind. So there are so many purifying agents, but the wind is a representation of Krishna in this world, because the wind is very powerful. Then Krishna says, of all the wielders of weapon, I am Rama, because no one wielded weapons better than Lord Ram. and therefore naturally he is the representation of Krishna. Then Krishna says, of all the fishes, I am the shark. And we all know that the shark is the greatest and most powerful of all the fishes. And therefore, he is considered to be the shark. And of all the flowing rivers, I am Ganges. Where there are many wonderful rivers, but particularly here, Krishna is saying, if you see amazing rivers, then you would definitely see the Ganges, which is a very powerful river, the most sacred river, and that river Ganges is a representation of Krishna. Why does Krishna give all of this in this chapter? What's he doing? The real reason why he's doing this, Acharyas tell us, is because there may be many of us who may claim that we have faith in Krishna until something happens. Or it could be that we have faith in Krishna, but it's not deep enough. We could also be amongst those people who believe that God is actually without form, which is a very popular concept amongst Hindus. Many Hindus are raised to think that God has no form, that He is formless. It's very strange because you use the word He and then you say He's formless. But we keep saying that God is formless. But actually the Bhagavad Gita, which is accepted ironically by all Hindus as the scripture for us, there is nothing in the Bhagavad Gita that actually even alludes to the fact that God is actually impersonal, that He is formless. This is something that escapes many of us if we don't study the Gita carefully. If you hear commentators, you will hear them saying very often, the Gita speaks about God who is formless. But ask them to show you the exact verse that tells you that, and they can never find the verse, because there is no such verse. In 10.8 of Bhagavad Gita, which is in this chapter, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, mattaha sarvam pravartate. Krishna says that I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. You see? So that's very important. Then Krishna says, the wise who perfectly know this, what do? They engage in my devotional service. And what else do? They worship me with all their hearts. That is why Krishna is speaking the Gita. He's speaking the Gita to tell us that everything that is around us, whether it is spiritual, whether it is material, the origin is Krishna. The source is Krishna. So whenever we see amazing things in this material world, the materialist who has no faith in Krishna will say, this is an amazing art. This is an amazing ocean. This is an amazing landscape. And they would appreciate nature. Many people appreciate nature. But the devotee will appreciate nature in a different way. The devotee will look at the ocean and say, this is an amazing ocean. But how amazing must be the creator of this ocean? This person may be very amazing in rendering poetry or speaking on a subject matter. How powerful must be that person who created this person? You see the point? So therefore, Bhagavad Gita teaches us through the 10th chapter that actually one can look at everything around us and we can still see the hand of Krishna and we can still see His energy. If there is a person who has amazing potential or talent, we praise them. But what do we always say naturally? We say, you have a God-given gift. Isn't it so? Naturally we say that to them. You are gifted, you're blessed. That is coming from the 10th chapter. The 10th chapter is the source of this kind of thinking. And that's why the 10th chapter is very important. So today, in today's verse, Krishna talks about 3 other things which are considered very important to actually show His greatness, right? To show His greatness. Now, Krishna starts by saying, of all the creations, I am the beginning, the end, and the middle. So therefore, Krishna is now saying, and Prabhupada elaborates, that there is so much of different levels of creation in this material world. So many different levels of creation. Every day we are creating something. You know, when mothers give birth, they create. When someone is writing something, there is creation. When Brahma, who is supposed to be the creator of this material universe, was given the opportunity to create, he had to pray to Krishna for strength to create. So there are different levels of creation. But the greatest level of creation, as Krishna says here, is that at all levels of creation, Krishna is involved at the beginning, He's in the middle and he's right at the end. That is a very important point. Therefore, it is very important for us to remember that Krishna says in Srimad Bhagavatam, just like Chatushloka is found in Bhagavad Gita, there are 4 seed verses in Srimad Bhagavatam. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 2nd canto, 9th chapter, I think it's the 33rd verse, 2.9.33, there Krishna tells Brahma a very important point. He says, Aham evasham evagre, nanyat yad sat asat param, paschad aham yad etacha, yo avashishyata so asminam. You look at the translation, and this is a very important point that brings us directly to this verse today. Krishna says very nicely here that Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead. So Krishna declares that I am the personality of Godhead. Then he tells Brahma that I was existing before creation. Sometimes we think, who existed before creation? Krishna answers that question. Krishna says that before creation came, I was existing. Then he goes on to say, when there was nothing at that time, there was only myself. So therefore, Krishna is the seed, the start of everything. That's why he's Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. Then Krishna goes on to say, at that time, Brahma, there was no material nature. There was nothing there. The cause of this creation that you see today was not even there at that time, because there was no creation. Then he says, that which you see now, whatever that Brahma was seeing now, and Brahma was alone, he was the first created being in the universe. All he saw was this vast expanse of universe. Now Krishna declares that whatever you see now is also coming from me. It is I, the personality of Godhead. And then he says at the end, Antya, at the end, and this entire creation is annihilated also, then what will remain after annihilation? All of us will not remain. All of us will not be here. We will be absorbed into Krishna. But only Krishna remains. So therefore, this is not something to be taken lightly. Sometimes we take for granted. We say that God is everywhere, God is supreme. What does it mean that He's supreme? What it means is that before we were here, He was here. Right now as we are here, He's here with us. And when everything ends, forget the universe ending, when we die, because that is our ending. Even when we die, at that end, Krishna is also with us. He is with us as the super soul. When we were born, He was with us as the super soul. Even before we were born, an unborn child within the womb of the mother, Krishna was also there as the super soul. Imagine, Krishna has been our eternal, lifelong companion. We think our husbands and our wives are our lifelong companion. But factually speaking, it is Krishna who is our lifelong companion. Because He was there before we were there. He was there when we were unborn. And He's now present in each of our hearts, even now as we speak. And at the time of our death, when everything is forsaking us, only Krishna remains. Only Krishna remains. So this is a very important point that we must remember. The other thing we must remember is Krishna is the cause of this entire material universe. Very important. As devotees, sometimes we are always talking about the spiritual world. And we always talk about Guru Vrindavan. We speak about how we should go to Vaikuntha Loka, why we should go to the spiritual world. But we don't realize that right now, we are very much in the material creation of the Lord. And this material creation of the Lord is very, very amazing. And it is coming from Krishna. Now, when you read Bhagavatam, Bhagavatam tells us that this entire material universe first comes out of Karanodakashari Vishnu. Prabhupada writes that in the purport. Karanodakashari Vishnu is the Vishnu from whom all these universes are emanating. Right? And when the universes are emanating, right, all these universes which are emanated, not just one universe, but many, many material universes, into each of these universes, another expansion of Krishna, known as Garbhodakashari Vishnu, He enters into those universes. When He enters into those universes, that universe is where you see Vishnu in the form of lying down, Ananta Shayanam. He's lying down on the bed known as Nagasesh, and that is Lord Balaram. And Mahalakshmi, his consort, is massaging his lotus feet. That Vishnu is known as Garbhodakashari Vishnu. And he is found in every universe. In fact, the whole universe emanates from that ocean of milk on which he is actually there. And that specific area of that universe is known as Svetadweep. And that is found in every universe. And from that creation of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu is lying down in what we call Yoga Nidra, not our Nidra, our sleep is not Yoga Nidra, right? Our sleep is very, very much anti-Yoga Nidra. We sleep and we don't know what is happening. But Garbhodakashayi Vishnu is not sleeping. He's in a state of deep, deep consciousness. As he's lying down there, a lotus flower comes out on a lotus stem from his navel. And as the lotus flower sprouts out in the darkness of the creation, Brahma is the first living being created. And when Brahma is created, when Brahma is first born, Brahma is known as Aja, because he's unborn in the sense that there is no mother. He's born out of the Supreme Father. And he looks around because he doesn't know the purpose of his existence. He doesn't know what he should do. Imagine you're looking around and everything is dark and you're not sure what to do. The only thing Brahma knows is that there is an origin to him. And that origin must be from the lotus flower. This is a question that all of us should ask, because this point of all creations, the question for us to ask for creation is, where and what is the source of my creation? Just like Brahma looked at the lotus stem and thought, this must be the source of my creation. Our journey in spiritual life must begin by asking first, perhaps I was born, I must be born. My parents are my immediate creators. Who created them? And who created them? And who created them? Those who ask that question, they start the path of spiritual life. So therefore, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu is the originator of Brahma. We always think that Brahma is the creator, but actually Brahma was born from the lotus flower. He was created by Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And within that Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, that lotus stem, are the 14 planetary systems of this material world. Imagine how amazing that is. So therefore, then what happens is, after Brahma prays very hard to Krishna in Bhagavatam, in the 3rd canto, those prayers are prayers that are very, very heartfelt prayers, because there he's asking for one thing: please give me the potency to do my service. And what is my service? The service to create. And therefore then Brahma receives from Krishna the potency to create. Which is why Krishna says in the 10th canto, in the 10th chapter also, he says a very important point, I think a little earlier. He says Paurusham Rishu. Paurusham Rishu means of ability. In man, I am ability. I am ability in man. Everything that we are capable of doing, any ability that we have, the ability to walk, talk, write, sing, compose poetry, do business, earn money, every ability that we have is coming from Krishna. So important. Paurusham Rishu, right? So that is why Brahma also had to pray to Krishna to get the power to actually create. This is the opulence of Krishna. That's why Krishna says, of all the creations, I am the beginning. In other words, when Brahma was here, I was the beginning. I was the beginning of Brahma. I am the source of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. I am the source of Karanodakashayi Vishnu also. Imagine. Because after Garbhodakashayi Vishnu creates this entire, in each universe there is a Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and then all the living beings are created in the universe. Every universe has living beings. And in every one of our hearts, Vishnu comes again. He comes in the form of Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. Kshirodakashayi Vishnu is known as Paramatma. Paramatma. So you see how intimately connected Krishna is. At every step of our life, Krishna is there. Krishna is in our heart as Super Soul. He is in this material world as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. He's created all these universes as Karanodakashayi Vishnu. This is the greatness of Krishna. But Bhagavatam tells us further that actually Mahavishnu, this great Karanodakashayi Vishnu, is actually a plenary portion of Krishna. A plenary portion of the portion of Krishna. Because we often think that Krishna has come from Vishnu. That is our normal thinking. But when you read Srimad Bhagavatam, you realize that the opposite is actually true. Because when you look at Krishna, from Krishna, based on Bhagavatam and based on Shastras, from Krishna comes Govinda. That is how Krishna comes. From Krishna comes Govinda. And then from Govinda comes Lord Balaram. Lord Balaram is the first expansion of Krishna. And therefore Krishna comes as Govinda, one who gives pleasure to the senses. And then he comes in as Lord Balaram. Once he comes as Lord Balaram, he then expands himself into another form. And that form is Lord Sankarshan. Sankarshan. From Sankarshan comes Narayana. The four-handed form, Narayana. From Narayana comes the second Sankarshan. And from second Sankarshan comes Karanodakashaya Vishnu. From Karanodakashaya Vishnu comes Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. From Garbhodakashaya Vishnu comes Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. And then the universe is all created. So can you imagine how many steps there are before we come to Krishna? Imagine. So if you look at it this way, let's get that right. Krishna, then Govinda, then Lord Balaram, then Sankarshan, then Narayana, then second Sankarshan, then Karanodakashaya Vishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. Then what happens? This entire universe is created. And in this entire universe, just our universe where we are, there are 14 planetary systems, right? 7 planets up and 7 planets below, and Bhurloka, Earth, right in the center. And within Bhurloka, as Srila Prabhupada pointed out so nicely, right, there are many, many, many continents. And in all these continents, there is a country called Singapore. And in Singapore, there is a place called Little India, Strangle Road. And in Strangle Road, there is a place called Cuff Road. And number 13 Cuff Road is where we are seated. How insignificant are we in the face of Krishna? That is the opulence of the Absolute. That is the point of the 10th chapter. If we can understand that point, then we learn to take the humble position that who are we actually? We can't even control our blood pressure, for God's sakes. And we think we can control everybody. We think we can control things, blood sugar, blood pressure, out of control. And yet I want to control this person, I want to control that person, I want to control the atmosphere, we want to control everything. But we have no control. All it requires is one of those fine membranes in our heads to suddenly burst. And that's the end of us. All it requires is some pull in our muscle and that's it. We are dysfunctional. All it requires is a fall somewhere and we can't move. And yet we think we are in control. So the opulence of the Absolute is meant to humble us. It's meant to make us understand we are very small actually. We are not very big. We are not very big. That's why Krishna says very nicely, where's that verse? I think that verse is in 1042 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. After all this, Krishna says something very nice. He says that, what need is there, Arjuna? He speaks of all his opulence. Then finally he says, what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge that I'm giving you? Why? Because with a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. This is Krishna. This is Krishna. So Krishna is actually telling us that humility is a very important component of our devotion service. So this is the point of creation. And if we want to understand how powerful creation is and how we are all built, then Bhagavatam tells us even more about who we really are. When Brahma has prayed to Krishna, and now after praying to Krishna, Krishna gives Brahma the power and the knowledge to create. Now before that happened, right, what does actually Brahma have to do? Brahma does not have to create any of the material elements of this world. Please remember that. Which is why in the purport, Prabhupada says that Brahma is a secondary creator. All the 5 elements that you see today, that comprises all of us and comprises everything, is actually created by Krishna. It is created by Krishna. Brahmaji comes to mix the elements, and from those elements, he created all the different beings. But the elements themselves were actually created by Krishna. And how did he create that elements? In this material world, the moment this material universe was created by Karanodakashaya Vishnu, there was nothing in this. But Krishna injected into this material universe what we call the state of unmanifested creation. It is known as pradhana. In pradhana, there are 24 elements. And these 24 elements are known as the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 organs for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action. All of this constitute pradhana. Okay? So what are they? The 5 elements are earth, water, right? What is it? Fire, air, and ether. They are the 5 elements. So Krishna throws them into this universe. Then there are 5 subtle elements. They flow with what we are there. So what we have is, we have the sense of smell, we have the sense of taste, we have color, we have touch, and we have sound. These are subtle elements. Then Krishna also created 10 senses. These are senses for acquiring knowledge and organs of action. So they work on the 5 material elements. So if you look at them, there's the sense of auditory. We are hearing now. All of us are hearing, hopefully. Then the sense of taste. Later you have prasadam. You will have taste. Then there's the tactile sense. You can touch. If you touch the floor, you feel something. Later when you dance for arati, your feet is touching the floor. Tactile senses. Sense of sight. If all of you get tired of looking at me, please look at Jagannath. Much better, right? And more purified. So there's the sense of sight. And the sense of smell. You can smell the incense and the flowers. And of course later when you go down, you can smell prasadam also. Right? So you see, all these are considered to be the 5 senses for acquiring knowledge. And now there are 5 organs which act on this. There's the organ for speaking, for working, for traveling, for generating, and for evacuating. All of this are created by Krishna. Amazing, isn't it? Sometimes people say, you know, when you read so many, when you hear from so many people, they just say, they say very limited things about God. But when you read the scriptures, you find so much details that it can take you a lifetime just to be absorbed in it. So this is what happens. Now what about the 4 internal subtle senses? That's also created. You add all of that, that's 20, and you add this, there are 4. These 4 are very important. They are subtle. You cannot see them, but you need them. One is mind. No one can see the mind, isn't it? If you ask a surgeon to do a brain surgery, you'll open up, he'll tell you this is the brain, but where's the mind? It's very hard to find the mind because it's subtle. And yet everyone knows that we all have a mind, isn't it? If you tell someone, I'll say my mind is made up. It's there. The second important subtle organ is the organ of the intelligence. We all have intelligence. People mix up the mind with intelligence. But the mind moves with the senses, but the intelligence is above the mind. The intelligence has the capacity to tell the mind, don't think of other things now. You are in Goranga Center. Try to hear. That's intelligence, right? Then the third organ, which is very important, is what we call ego. Ego is not false ego. Ego means a sense of identity, real ego. Every one of us have our own eternal identity. And our eternal identity is actually to be servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord. That is our ego. And that is also created by Krishna. And the last one is the real challenge. It's known as contaminated consciousness, what we call false ego. The moment consciousness is contaminated, we think that I am the creator. I am the controller. I know everything. Don't have to tell me anything. I've read the Gita hundreds of times. That's contaminated consciousness. So all of this together, my maths is not good, but together, you put them together, it's 24. But they're all in a state of unmanifest. They are floating. They are not moving, but they are 24 elements. Now Krishna injects one last element into these 24. And then the whole universe awakens. What is that last element?
Yes.
Time. Time, Kala, right? Kala doesn't belong to us. Kala is the monopoly of Krishna. You may want to think you are in control of time, but it's very difficult to control time. You can be disciplined to flow with time, but if you want to control time, then you can only control it if you are devotional in nature. Sometimes we think I can control time. If you can, then you will not die, because time should not run. But controlling time means to use time well. Don't mix that up with control. Using time well has nothing to do with controlling time. If you use time well, you respect time. Therefore, you respect Krishna. All of you have come here today to hear about Krishna. You are respecting time. Therefore, the time element doesn't touch you in an unfavorable way. It actually gives you peace. On the platform of time, it gives you inspiration and it gives you so much of happiness. So no one can control time, but one can flow with time. And time is that element which is very important, the mixing element. And so the moment time enters, Bhagavatam tells us, then this whole universe is agitated and it wakes up. And when it wakes up, from pradhana, it becomes Mahatattva. Mahatattva means it becomes what we call the Virat Roop. The universe is now awakened. Then the universe is ready for Brahma to start sub-creation. Sub-creation means take the combinations of different material elements and produce different creatures, different creatures, different creatures. So you see how amazing, how scientific, and how powerful is the opulence of the Absolute. This is Krishna. So this is a very important point for us to remember. Now that we have known that this is the greatness of creation, there's another point that Krishna says that is very important. And that is that at the end of the day, this entire creation, right, is only 1/4 the entire creation of Krishna. 1/4. This material creation is 1/4 of Krishna's entire creation. The 3/4 of Krishna's entire creation is actually in the spiritual sky. The spiritual sky. And yet we are here. And this material creation is already so vast. Imagine how vast must be the spiritual creation of Krishna. But then the question will come. If we are in the material creation, how do we become spiritual? We can. The beauty of matter is that by the mercy of Krishna, if we utilize matter in the service of the Lord, this material creation can be spiritualized. That is the beauty of Krishna consciousness. And that's why we are here. You will find that every time you utilize the valuable 25th element of this universe, time, if you use it in the service of Krishna, that usage will make your activity spiritual. Isn't it true? If you did not use this time now for Krishna, you'll be at home. And chances are we'll be doing more material activities than spiritual activities. So that is a very important point for us to remember. The other important point for us to remember is that time waits for no one. Right? Time waits for no one. Which means we should not waste time. We should not waste time. When time is coming, use it well. We have a saying, right? Use it or lose it. Time is the best example of that. And that is why of all the creations, there are so many divisions of creations. Krishna is in the beginning, Krishna is in the middle, and Krishna is right at the end. So we should always remember that every time we see anything in this material creation, don't reject it for the sake of rejecting it. That's not useful. If you can use it for the pleasure of Krishna, if you can use it in Krishna consciousness, that is considered renunciation. Sometimes our problem is we look at a material object and we reject it simply because it appears to be material. We should not do that. If we really understand the principle of creation, then anything can be utilized for Krishna. This sound system is being well utilized for Krishna. The harmonium is being well utilized for Krishna. Our words, our speech is being well utilized for Krishna. All our senses can be well utilized for Krishna. And therefore there is nothing material when it is utilized for Krishna. This is the example of creation. The second point that's very important here is Krishna speaks about knowledge. And knowledge is considered to be science. If you look at the verse today, Krishna says of all sciences, I am the spiritual science of the self. In other words, there are many sciences. We learn physics, chemistry, there are so many branches of science. And for those of you who have come from the science stream, you know that science comes down to just one thing. You have a theory, you test it, it works, it's considered scientific. That's basically what science is. So when people come up to us and say, spirituality is not science, that's not true. Because people think that when you take up a spiritual life, it is all about the heart, it's all about emotions, it's all about faith. But actually, Bhagavatam declares to us, our Shastras declare to us, that bhakti, devotion to Krishna, is actually a science. Why? Because it is a process. We have come together. Have you noticed that the program is very structured in the first place? Right? We started by having Tulsi Arati. For those who came earlier, we had Tulsi Maharani. Tulsi is considered to be the greatest devotee of the Lord. And therefore, when we worship her, we seek her blessings. Then we chanted. And now we are hearing about Krishna. And later we will chant again. Now, chanting is very powerful. And even reading the Gita is very powerful. But if you want to test it, then practice it. If it works, then the theory obviously has elements in practice. Use it then. That's why our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada told us that this movement is not an emotional movement. It's not a speculative movement. It's not a sentimental movement. It is a scientific movement. It's very important. That's why when people come and say, I don't believe in Krishna, that's actually it's a fallacious statement. If you want to believe in Krishna, why don't you test the theory first? You chant Krishna's names. Chant it regularly. Chant it every day for 10 minutes at a specific time. Chant it well. Chant it with devotees. Try it for 1 week. Try it for 2 weeks. If the process works, then you have tested a theory. And if it works, it's science. That is what science is. And Krishna says here, of all the sciences, I am the spiritual science of the self. And Prabhupada says science, the basis of science is actually knowledge. The basis of science is knowledge. Because without having knowledge, we won't know what we are doing, we won't know why we are doing something. That's very, very important. You know, I give this example very often. That there was a boy who was very young, and his sister was getting married, and she was seated for marriage. And you know, for marriage you have so many paraphernalia in front of you, isn't it? Half the things we don't know what they are, but we just know I need to get married, so we just sit there. So this boy was sitting there, and the priest had set up everything, and suddenly a cat walked into the space. And when the cat came in, you know what would cats do if it was all nicely arranged? It would be a havoc. So immediately the priest was smart. He took a basket, caught the cat, and put it aside. And so it did not disturb anything. It was just there. The boy noticed it, sister got married. 10 years later, the boy is ready to get married. And he's seated. And now he's watching everything that's being laid out. And finally, after everything is done, before the wedding can start, he stops the pandit. He says, sir, you've forgotten a very important item in the wedding. Where's the cat with the basket? That is what we call, right, speculative knowledge. There's no basis for the cat there. But 90% of our practices have started that way. Somebody somewhere decided, I'll just add something to it. And then you add, your grandfather added, your great-grandfather added, and then your nieces, nephews, your children, and then your great-grandchildren add, but nobody knows why it was there. They just think there must be a cat. If there's no cat, the wedding is inauspicious. If there's no cat, there'll be a divorce. And people will talk like that. But there's no basis. The Gita tells us not to do that. Spiritual life should not be speculative. It has to be transcendental. Right? And that's why in 2.9.31 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna says this very nice point. He says so nicely, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Jnanam Paramaguyam Me Yad Vijnana Samanvitam Sahasrasyam Tat Angam Cha Grahana Ganitam Maya. Let's chant it again. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Jnanam Paramaguyam Me Yad Vijnana Samanvitam Sahasrasyam Tat Angam Cha And Krishna says so nicely in the translation. He says, the personality of Godhead says, knowledge about me as described in the scriptures is very confidential. And it has to be realized in conjunction with devotional service. The necessary paraphernalia for that process is being explained by me. You may take it up carefully. He's speaking to Brahma now. Just before he starts telling Brahma Chatushloka, just before he gives Brahma all spiritual knowledge, this is what he says. And that's why of all the sciences, I am the spiritual science of the self. In other words, what Krishna is saying is, there is knowledge. There's so much of knowledge in this world. But knowledge about Krishna is very confidential. Please remember that. Even in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, for example, is known as, what is chapter 9 known as? Most confidential knowledge. When we say it is confidential, it doesn't mean it's secret in the sense that you can't read it. Otherwise, why is it in chapter 9? It's there. Everyone can read it. But it's confidential because it requires us to have a certain mood. What is that mood? In conjunction with devotional service. That's very important. In other words, if we want to understand Krishna, to know Krishna, we must first become a devotee of Krishna. When there is the element of devotion injected into the study of Krishna, that devotion opens up our hearts to understand Him better. That's very important. That is the key. And that is why it is so unique. So that's why Krishna says here, knowledge about me is in the scripture, but it is confidential. It's one thing to know one thing, it's another thing to realize it. Have you all experienced that? You know, like sometimes your parents may say, it's so difficult to raise children, so difficult to raise children when you're young. You thought, what's the big problem? Just give me my pocket money, I'm okay. Why not talking like that? Until you become fathers and mothers. Then you realize, oh my God, all the problems I gave my mother, he's giving me now. The same things I used to tell my father, I'm hearing it from her now. And suddenly we realize this is no walk in the park. That's realization. Of course, that's not the realization we want, but that's the realization. My Guru Maharaj used to say another way to understand realization is slap. Very often our realizations come in the form of slaps, isn't it? Because we may have said certain things to our parents, suddenly 20 years later, the same things we used to tell our parents, our children are telling us now. That's a slap from Maya. It is. So therefore, it's one thing to understand knowledge, it's another thing to realize knowledge. You know, there in our Shastra, there's a very nice story. There was this Brahmana who was very, very expert in Vedic knowledge, Brahmanical knowledge. He was a teacher. So he was teaching Shastras all the time. And he was very immaculately dressed. He had this golden silken dhoti, he would look very nice, and he was always studying the scripture. Now he lived in a hut, and across the hut from an island, there used to be this young girl called Lakshmi. And she would often take a boat, she would cross over, and she would give the Brahmana milk. Because she was a milkmaid, she came from a family that was rearing cows. Now sometimes she would not be punctual. Because when the boatman had good mood, he would be punctual, bad mood, he wouldn't turn up. So when he was not punctual, the Brahmana would get very angry and say, Lakshmi, why are you not punctual today? And she would say, the boat was late, I'm very sorry. And he would say, don't give me these excuses. Do you not have faith in Krishna? Why do you need a boat to cross over? If you have faith in Krishna, you can walk over and Krishna will allow you to walk over. That is faith. So Lakshmi thought, I never knew that. And he said, yes, that's what Shastras tell us. You have to have faith. And so next morning, the Brahmana woke up and thought she would be late. To his surprise, she was ready. She was ready on time. And so Brahmana said, Lakshmi, today the boatman was early. She said, no, I followed your instructions. What do you mean? You told me to have faith and cross the river. And so I had faith and I crossed the river. And he said, show me how you crossed the river. He said, you said, I must chant Krishna's names and I can cross. So I chanted Krishna's names and I crossed. So he said, you chant now and cross. And so she chanted and she crossed. And Brahmana became perplexed. So Lakshmi turned around and said, I'm very grateful to you. Because all this time I did not have knowledge. You have so much knowledge. And now you have told me about this knowledge. And I practiced it. And it works for me. So why don't you try and you show me also? So Brahmana thought, okay, never tried. I've been speaking about all this, but I've been saying to everybody, don't worry, chant, chant. We do that also, isn't it? We tell people all the time, somebody's in difficulty, Prabhu, don't worry, just chant, everything will be fine, until it happens to us. Right? Then we think, oh my God, with all the chanting, nothing is happening. Why? Because of the element of devotion and the missing element of faith. So Brahmana started walking. He chanted Krishna's names, then he remembered his silken dhoti. Because he didn't want his dhoti to be wet. So he started remembering dhoti. So there was more dhoti consciousness than Krishna consciousness. And after a while, he went right into the water. And he came out and he said, today, Lakshmi, you have taught me something which I have not learned, even though I am the teacher. And what is the thing that I've learned? That knowledge, it's one thing to understand knowledge, to know something. It's another thing to act on it. It may take time, but we have to act on it. That action, right, is the spiritual science of the self. Spiritual science of the self means that that knowledge is knowledge relating to us as eternal spiritual beings, not as temporary beings. We have to act on it. That is what we're trying to do. And that knowledge is the highest knowledge. And one last point that's really important here, and this is really nice, is the point of not just knowledge, but the fact that Prabhupada says this very nicely. Prabhupada says that if you practice Krishna consciousness, what will happen is, not only are you acting on the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, like today, we have spoken so much about the opulence of Absolute. How are we going to practice it? That's what we should be thinking today when we are having prasadam. Not talking about the weather and this and that, but thinking, how do we practice this? So Prabhupada says, if we start thinking of how to act for Krishna's pleasure, we will purify our senses. Please remember this statement. This is the essence of knowledge. If we start thinking, how can I actually make Krishna happy or please Krishna? The moment you think that way, your senses are automatically purified. How beautiful. People always ask how to purify senses. Do I stand on my head upside down for 30,000 years? Do I practice yogic breathing exercises? Do I spend long time in meditation? Which is all very difficult in Kali Yuga. But if we chant Krishna's names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then by continuously practicing this chanting, Prabhupada said our senses become immediately purified. When that happens, we will eternally establish our relationship with Krishna. So Prabhupada has a formula. One, he says, realize knowledge. When you realize the knowledge you are studying, you become perfect. Through transcendental knowledge, you become steady. In other words, if you read a book on geography and history, that's material knowledge. But if you start reading the Gita, that's transcendental knowledge. And if you study transcendental knowledge, your convictions, spiritual convictions, will become steady. Otherwise, what will happen is, one week you come to center, another week I don't feel like, today you will chant, tomorrow you won't chant, because your conviction is not steady. But if you are studying regularly, if you're reading with devotees, if you're chanting, if you're practicing, that will steady your conviction. But Prabhupada ends by saying, if you have mere academic knowledge, then you can be easily deluded and confused by apparent contradiction. So don't approach the Gita from an academic point of view. If you do that, you'll miss the bus. I have met professors and doctors and professionals who try to approach the Gita from an academic point of view, and they find themselves being very confused. I have met children this age, this whole bunch here, right, sitting here. They're all yogis, huh? They've been very quiet. They're all very young. But I tell you, when they read the Gita and they explain the Gita, you will be shell-shocked, because they can understand the Gita and they can realize the Gita better. Because they are not approaching it from academia. They are approaching it as devotees. As devotees. If you tell them Krishna is supreme, they will not take it from an academic point of view. Define supreme. What does supreme mean? They will say Krishna is the best, he is the greatest, therefore I should take shelter of him. What have they done? In one single sentence, they have moved from academic reception of knowledge to immediate practice of knowledge, because they say, I accept him as supreme, and therefore I will always depend on him. Therefore, depend on him is the practical realization of the academic knowledge. You see that? They will tell you that. They will definitely tell you that. Even if they didn't know that, now they will tell you that. Now all these highly realized souls will tell you that. But that is the difference. And that's why of all the sciences, Krishna says, I am spiritual science. And last one, right? So we have covered the creations, we've covered the knowledge. Now let us look at one last point, and this point is very nice. This point is, where is it? Of all, among logicians, I am conclusive truth. Prabhupada writes in the purport very nicely that there are different ways to argue a theory. Anyone here students of logic? I'm just interested. If you have learned philosophy in university, for example, you would have learned logic, right? In law, for example, we learn logic. And lawyers are very proud because they think they're extremely logical. That's why we argue and argue till the cows come home, not knowing that our logic actually doesn't make sense. Because after all the argument, nobody really hears us actually, right? We just win cases, that's all. So Prabhupada writes here that actually there is a branch of science known as logic. And in logic, right, there are so many ways to put forward an argument. Prabhupada says very nicely that there is an argument with evidence that supports the opposite side. It's called jalpa, right? Now, years ago when I read this, I was in law school. And I was shocked that Prabhupada wrote this because that's the same style of argument that we also were taught in advocacy. In advocacy, we are taught different styles. How you rattle witnesses, how you shake them up, how you put forward arguments. For example, I'll give you an example. Another logic is this. Before you start the case, right, the logic in the science of logic is concede your weakest points first. The best lawyers do that. We concede our weakest points first. Your Honor, these are the weakest points in my case. People will think, why are you conceding right now? But actually it's very intelligent, at least from a material point of view. Because if I don't concede the weakest point, my opponent will stand up later and he will shoot me down with all these points and the impression created is very bad. But if I stand up and say, Your Honor, my client is very honest. He's telling you that these are all his weak points. What is the impression created? The judge says, oh, this is an honest client you have. You see, that is what we call jalpa. You are putting forward an argument that appears to be for your opponent, but actually it's for yourself. It's for yourself actually, right? So Prabhupada is amazing. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, merely trying to defeat one's opponent is called vitanda. That's what people try to do. They defeat people with logic, they defeat people with evidence, with witnesses and everything. But Prabhupada writes the actual point. He said of all logic, there is the most important logic is the logic of Vada. Vada means what is the truth? What is the truth behind everything that we are discussing? And then Prabhupada says, this conclusive truth is the representation of Krishna. In other words, in this material world, truth is relative. If you think about it, what is truth for me, what I see a situation as is very different from how you see it. Two people can be hearing the same thing, but our version of that truth and your version of that truth is relative. I could have gone through the same experience you did, and you see it differently and I see it differently. And this is another thing I see very often in my profession. Husband and wife will come and they say, we want a divorce. And when you talk to them, the first thing, the husband will give you his version of events. And it's like a movie. It's a story. Then the wife will give you her version of events. Same situation, but her story. And this is, both of them have truths. But the truth, according to Bhagavatam, is relative. Two friends have an argument. I argue based on what I think, my background, my thoughts, my culture. You argue based on your background, your thoughts, your culture, your peeves, and your difficulties. The truth is there, but it is relative. You see the point? It is relative. But Krishna says, of all the logicians, I am conclusive truth. Conclusive truth in Krishna consciousness is known as Satyam. Satyam. And there is only one Satyam, the absolute Satyam. Param Satyam Dhimahi. In other words, right, Bhagavatam's conclusion and Bhagavatam's beginning says that Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. That's who he is. S-A-T, Sat. He is supreme, he is absolute, and he is truth. So we should not waste our time, practically speaking, whenever there are discussions, whenever there are difficulties, differences. A devotee is mature. A devotee doesn't look at the differences from an absolute point of view. We learn to understand that your view may be from a certain point of view, And my view may be coming from a certain point. Instead of trying to understand who is absolute, because none of us are absolute, we learn to adjust. That is the mood of the devotee. Devotees learn to adjust with each other. We understand where you've come from, and you appreciate where we've come from. But most important is, let us put Krishna in the center. The moment Krishna comes in the center, all the difficulties go. They go. One very simple example of this is found in an episode in Srimad Bhagavatam, and with that I will end. Prithu Maharaj, if you remember, is a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's an avatar. He's an incarnation of the Lord. And he came into this world to establish righteousness. And he milked Bhumi Devi at a time when she was not giving anything. And she gave plentiful to the earth. Then Prithu Maharaj decided to ensure I have supremacy over the whole world, and I will rule it according to Vedic principles. I will perform a very important sacrifice known as the Ashwamedha sacrifice. The Ashwamedha sacrifice will install me as the supreme ruler of all rulers. Now, the way to do the Ashwamedha sacrifice is you can't do one. Many great kings have done one. But only one person in this entire universe has done 100. That's a century in cricket terms, right? 100. And who is it? Indra. Indra, right? The king of Swargaloka. Only he did 100. So Prithu Maharaj decided, if I want to be taken seriously as the king of kings, I must also do 100. So then he prepared and started 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Indra kept watching. When he came to 90, 91, 92, Indra became a little bit worried. Because he thought, all this time I am the supreme. I am the one with the 100. But now if he becomes 100, I'm not very happy. It's a human tendency, isn't it? Very often we have this idea. We think that only I can have this kind of thing. I'm the world champion. I've done this 9 times, 10 times. You've done this only 1 time. But when someone comes to that level, we see them as a rival. So Indra became envious of Prithu. And so you know what he did? The Ashwamedha sacrifice involves sacrificing a horse, right? And the horse would be given an afterlife which is much more great. So the horse must be taken around the kingdom, and the horse would be tied and waited before the sacrifice. Every time the last sacrifice, the 99th, he had finished 99, he was going to finish the last one. As he was going to finish the last one, he would kill the sacrificial horse, and at that time Indra would come. But Indra wouldn't come as Indra. Indra would come disguised as a sannyasi. You know, when you see someone in saffron robes, you call them Maharaj, he's from a renounced order. We have a lot of high regard for them, and out of respect we will not say anything. So whenever there was the 99th attempt, the 100th attempt was coming, Indra would come in the guise of a sannyasi. And when Prithu Maharaj and his son and all the other kings, or all the other retinue saw that actually someone was stealing the horse and they gave chase, when they saw it was a sannyasi, they would not do anything. They would leave him. Now Prithu became very irritated because he realized it was Indra. And Indra was coming in different disguises. And it was not correct. It was forbidden for kings to kill someone from a renounced order of life. So finally he became very upset. Because at this rate, he would never finish his 100 sacrifice. So at that point of time, Prithu Maharaj had a lot of these priests who were ready to perform the sacrifice. They said, Prithu, why are you so worried about this? We are so powerful. We will chant mantras and Indra will be finished. So let us sit down and we will chant mantras. Now the purpose of the sacrifice was to remember and glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Prithu forgot. The priests had forgotten, and they were going to use the place of the sacrifice to chant these prayers to kill Indra. Just when they were about to start, Brahma came down and said, what is wrong with all of you? Have you forgotten the purpose of this sacrifice? The purpose of this sacrifice is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he told Prithu, does a number really matter? Must you hit 100 to gain the respect of the world? Or should you behave yourself in such a way that people give you the respect? 99 and 100 is just a number. It's not important. So be peaceful in what you have done. And that's a very important lesson to all of us actually.